Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. Visit commandcontrolpower.com for show notes and click support to join our community for exclusive access to patron-only episodes, special features, merchandise, and other membership perks. This is Joe Saponari of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. Thanks for listening. So, Jerry, why the long voice?
I don't know, Joe.
Some people ask why the long face. I don't know if that works with the voice, but I do sense that, maybe a little bit of tiredness. And I know you were just recently on a short family vacation. So how you feeling? How's it going?
I'm getting older, Joe. My parts are starting to wear out, and, we go away for a few days and one of my teeth is bothering me. It's all, I'm just breaking down.
Man.
So you have a lot to look forward to, young Joe.
I hear that. I mean, I notice the changes over time.
You still got a few more good years left, but
I hope so.
As for me, it's all downhill from here. And, it completely translates sometimes into the way I relate to clients. And I never want to put a bad pall over my business in any way. But there's things that happen where it's just like, you know what? I don't want to say I don't care anymore because that's a real strong statement. But sometimes I'm like, whatever. For instance, I was trying to scare up a little bit of work with this client who I recently did a really nice install for him with a new Dream Machine Pro special edition and a switch and multiple access points. He's in a brand new building. He put all his hard-earned money into this building and renovated this 1700s style 2-story, I don't know whether you call it a colonial, and it looks really nice inside. And he's got a professional business. And he's not in a high crime area, but I always love how you can take the Unify Ubiquity equipment and it's extensible. I've experimented a lot with the Synology DS cam system, and that works great, but I like to hedge my bets sometimes and have other options. And I've recently been able to pick up Unify cameras. They're starting to resupply them. For a long time, you couldn't really get any of the Unify cameras except the very expensive ones, which were in the $400 or $500 range. They make less expensive cameras, one even for $30, but they're starting to come available. So I've picked up some along the way and set them aside. So I sent this client a very nice email saying, hope you're enjoying your new building. If you'd like to explore what it would be like to add some security cameras or add cameras to your system, this might be a great opportunity. And he writes me back, and he's usually very friendly and very professional. And he writes me back within like several hours. I sent the message off in the morning. And he wrote, how much? $$, $$. Not, hey, Jerry, thanks. How much?
Right. How much?
Just how much? And I thought, what is this? Is this like a sitcom character?
Yeah. I think the correct response is, it's not $9.99. It's not $8.99. Would you believe it's only $7.99 to ensure your security of your building?
I wrote back and I thought about it long and hard. And I said, yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that. I could see you're really open to the idea.
Oh, sarcasm with clients is always a good angle. That plays really well. Oh, man.
He's turned down recurring managed services in the past, and I did him a real solid by putting in this system. He bought all the equipment himself, and I know you like to do that too. I gave him a real fair shake on the installation, and it didn't take very long. So he did pretty well by me. To hit me with how much, I just felt that was a little unfair. So throw a little back in his court.
Right. You're right. It's the kind of response that a client thinks they can always get away with because they're the one like writing the checks or whatever, and I see that you're responding in kind, nothing wrong with that. Because like you said, I mean, if he's not a likely buyer, how much effort does it make sense for you to put in to answering his simple, in theory, simple question, how much? Like, well, I'd have to actually like spec this all out, write it up, think it through. I'd almost want to respond back, how much is your budget? The sky's the limit. I mean, I can put an armed guard in front of your building, to get really secure, 24/7 if you've got like unlimited budget. Maybe a fair response would be, what's your budget? And if the client said, what can you do for $1,000? You could say, well, I could get a couple of decent cameras and, to spend an hour or two to program them. You know what I mean? Maybe it could go somewhere, but you kind of want to know where it could go before you invest a whole lot of time into it.
Yeah, it's like the old Sopranos series. He's disrespecting the club when he just sends an email back. How much? It's not like I'm dealing with a guy who's running a delicatessen. We're talking about a highly paid professional that I've always had a terrific relationship with, and he just came off of a really good experience with me. Right. And we had casually discussed, not via email, throwing 1 or 2 cameras up and having him play with it. Minimal investment on cameras. At this point, he's going to have to wait till he gets ripped off or he's concerned about security. Then,
then it'll be worth the whatever price. He'll be really interested then. Yeah,
exactly. Also on the heels of, clients who agree to do managed services with you, but then you can't nail them down to get your managed service software installed. And of course, now, if you're working remote with a client, let's say their primary computer is a portable and they're not in the office every day and they're on the road and they're executive level people, it's a little bit more challenging to do, for instance, the full Adigy install for device management, because you've got to start up partition and you've got to lower the security level so you can install all the Adigy extensions. I've got clients that I'm chasing down, trying to get that stuff installed, trying to get Backblaze installed. Now, they've paid for the product. Right. So at this point, how far down the street do I have to run chasing you to say, hey, come on, it'll only take a few minutes. I won't even charge you for it. Forget
a lesser consultant wouldn't care. A lesser consultant would say, all right, I got their money. They paid for the service. It's half set up. It's not my problem if they never do it. But like you, I would be the same way. I'd be following up with them, chasing them down. It's still on my radar. The ticket is still open, because it's not finished installing. And now that's interesting. You mentioned that you do take clients through that rebooting to recovery and adjusting the startup security so that you're allowing an unsupervised Mac to have managed software updates. I kind of thought about this recently. I get it from Apple's perspective that, in order to maintain chain of custody, so to speak, there's a better term for it that I can't think of. But in order to maintain the security of the system, it has to know the source of software that's being installed. So as soon as you start to allow third-party platforms to manage the updates that are being installed, in theory, you can't quite control it to the same degree that you can if you're the first party, Apple, using the built-in mechanisms to just simply prompt in the software update panel to install the update. Now, I don't take most clients through that. I just tell them to ignore that little message that says this MDM is requesting these additional permissions. I typically don't walk down that road, and I therefore don't get the same benefits of managing software updates.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
All I can do is prompt them to open the software update window and they have to click update. It stumps them, because Apple doesn't design it so clearly, upgrades versus updates. So they end up clicking upgrade to Monterey, even if we're not yet recommending that for their company. Yeah, so it opens up a whole can of worms if you don't do that. It does make it more annoying. So it's maybe it's better in your method to just have the annoyance up front, but in some cases you do have to chase a client down, to be able to get them to follow through on that.
Yeah, because then if you let it go, then they just plague you with questions down the road, and they're like, well, why didn't you install the whole thing? Or it's just better to do the full Monty. But at this point, fuck it, I'm moving on, and I got the money. I'm not going to chase you down the road anymore. Very sadly, this person was not an extremely close personal client of mine, but still somebody I had a very good relationship with. It's a residential client, and we outfitted a really large Unify network for her home. Not a newly constructed home, but one she had purchased, but 4,000, 5,000 square feet, big place. Oh. She recently passed away. It was untimely. We have mentioned this on the shows before, but I got this great idea from JD Strong where he puts a sticker, a business sticker, on the installation rack, whether he's put it in himself or he's managing a system that he's taken over. He brands the installation and it says, do not touch this. This is managed by, and if you have any questions, please call this number. And I know for a fact I have at least one sticker on that rack. And I thought, well, there's a really good thing to have. That's a good business practice because, sometimes unexpectedly, clients change or they move, or in this unfortunate case, this client passed on. And I don't know if that house is going to be turned over really quickly. Somebody may walk into there who has no knowledge of us at all, and they're going to go like, what the heck is all this stuff? They have a way of reaching out to you to see if you can provide services for them and continue the service. And I think I bought a roll of like 50 or 100 stickers, and I'm still on the same roll. Maybe I've distributed 20 during the last couple of years. I don't do it in every case because, I don't want to be like that PC guy, like peeing on all my territory.
Right.
And like a feral cat, In this case, I'm glad there's some sort of contact there. Really sad set of circumstances, but I don't expect this woman's daughter, who's a grown adult, to somehow connect with me and say like, oh, we're selling the house and here's the new owner's contact details. Nobody's going to do that for you. So at least if you've got a little bit of badging on your work, it's a good way for them to find you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't even thought about that. In the unfortunate case you mentioned of a client passing away, it's very likely that the person who comes in to sell the house, clean things up, or maybe this stuff just gets left in the house and the house gets sold with an installed wireless network for all you know. You do want them to have someone who they can call to be able to manage it. We actually had a case where a client sold her house and moved to another state far away and brought some of the equipment, but they said they were leaving the network. So they left without taking anything. So they actually had us go on site after they sold the house, facilitated by the new owner, and pack up the Synology that was their like centralized backup system in the home and ship it out to them in their new address, and then coordinate with the tech, on site there to install it and configure it and stuff. We helped spec a new network for their new home, and then we were in touch with the new owner of the old home, who then inherited all this equipment, the existing unified network. And so we basically just kind of like reconfigured it for them, renamed things for them, and we manage it for them now. So I thought that was a good sign, but it really depended on the former client putting us in touch with the new owner. That it speaks to your point. I mean, it would have been great just to have our branding kind of right on the network. So somebody goes to the basement saying, let's see what's going on here. And, your info's right there. That's another great tip.
I see Sam has crawled into the cave. Sam, do you do anything like that, Sam? Any badging of your network rack work?
I went the habit of creating asset tags for equipment. So it has like 3-letter code dash several digits, and then it says managed by HCS Technology Group, and it shows our support ticket email address in there. So we just kind of slap that on. It's a small little 1-inch or 1.5-inch asset tag. It's not very big. I remember the ones that you created, Jerry, based on JD Strong's recommendation. It looked like a stop sign, basically, right?
That's right.
Either way, you want to have some form of this is who I am in case someone random shows up in that place. Or, let's say you do some really nice work. Maybe someone's like passing by during a party and they're just like, oh, who did this for you? And they could just pick that up as a possible referral from there.
Yeah, every time you say asset tag, I think of the metal tags that used to be on the bottoms of the school chairs that the kids used to peel off.
Yeah. That kind of look like that, actually.
Is that what you use, Sam? Like you said, it has that code or prefix kind of thing. Is that different for every tag is different? Like you get a roll of like a series of numbers or something?
Yeah, for like small customers, we just do HCS dash something, and we have just a whole big roll sheets of those. And then for bigger companies, we'll put like their prefix in there, if it's like a 3-letter code. And then each computer, networking device, and everything else has a unique value. So like when someone calls us and like, hey, I'm Joe, it's like, okay, what's your asset tag? And then we can look it up by that.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And so that's in your ticketing system or your overall kind of management system?
Yeah, exactly. We have it in the device record so we can always see what's what.
Very cool. Like that idea. Well, on the topic of Jerry's, some of the racks and stuff and photos you've sent, this came up in the Mac admin Slack, and I thought this was pretty cool. Rackmount.it. I'm sure you guys already know about this. I'm always the last to find out about the cool stuff, but they make a lot of really cool custom rack mounts that are oftentimes not any more expensive than the vendor supplied options, and certainly even more professional looking. It'll take ports, for example, that are on the back of like a firewall, gateway, whatever, move them to the front essentially with little like patch cables, that route within the chassis of this rack mount to the back of the device where the ports are mounted to the back. And this way you have like the lights on the front and also the ports on the front. And they're all custom for like lots of different vendors and things. So it's a pretty cool option to know if you like to design a beautiful looking rack.
I'm looking at their site. Pretty awesome. I mean, I've used some things similar to what they offer. Like there's a Mac Mini one in here. This looks very nice and sleek in terms of what you can retrofit into this.
I'm just over here, as I mentioned, I think in the prior show, trying to get my client just to approve buying a rack in the first place. Like I think they would rather just see a pile on the floor, on the carpeted floor and just vacuum around it kind of thing. It's just like client I'm thinking of too. They used to have this beautiful you'd walk into their office and the IT closet was straight ahead, but it was just a full glass panel you could see into, and you'd see all this cool equipment in there, like back in the days when everything had blinking blue lights all over it and stuff. So you had this like beautiful looking rack straight ahead as you walk in. And of course, I think, when they had clients and vendors visiting them, I think it was pretty impressive to see, and that's the same client. They used to like really prioritize this, the aesthetics of it and just having the equipment really nicely housed and even displayed. And they just seem to be cutting more corners.
Sometimes we have a hard time getting the customers to spend anything on cable management, right. Simple stuff like that. So I love this, but I can see getting a lot of pushback from a lot of customers. Because I would love to just throw, for instance, like a Sonic firewall that's just sitting on a shelf in there. I would love to put this in a nicely sleek rack. Yeah. They won't pay for that because they'll be like, it works, it's sitting there. Why do you need to put it in this thing?
You just pad your equipment costs and then just buy this stuff for yourself.
Just buy it anyway. Yeah.
And just put it in your house or whatever.
That's one way to go.
Be happy, yeah.
In some cases, it's better, to your point, not to show each item and all the pricing and like linking to all the vendors like I typically do, because then they ask about each item. Do I need this item? Yeah, that's why it's on the list. Do I need this item? Well, you don't need that item, but like if you don't have it, it's just on a shelf, then I'm going to be spending an extra 15 minutes on the phone trying to walk someone through like which thing I'm talking about, and like how to find it on the back of the shelf because it got pushed back there. There are benefits to having things organized, ease of support, and just like minimizing, the possibility of issues. So it's hard to justify from their perspective when they're just asking you, do I need this? And you're like, well, I want you to have it. I think it's a good idea, or I wouldn't have spec'd it. Technically, like you don't need any of this stuff. Like you could just go buy a Linksys, or whatever. Need is a kind of a slippery slope there.
It is. When it comes to some of this stuff, it just looks professional, and need is definitely a slippery slope. It's easy if you're doing like a new rack with stuff, then it's easier to kind of throw in there and they're like, I don't know what this rack mount thing is, but it's with the pricing for everything else. Upgrade and change and make things look better. That's a little of a tougher sell. I think I talked about this once on the show, but I told this client the rack was a mess of wires and everything. And I said, I want to spend a few hours with your approval to clean this up. And the owner was like, well, fine. And I did it. And we did a really good job of cable ties and having them route properly in the rack. And it looked really good. And I was so proud of myself. I brought him in the server closet to have a look. He's like, that's what I paid you for? And I was like, come on.
Really?
Like, yeah, he was just like, so what? Like, what does that really do for us? I'm like, well, like he was so unimpressed. And I was so like bummed out because I was so proud of my work.
Yeah.
Next time that happens, Sam, give him my number. I'll talk to him.
Just stick Jerry's asset tag right on there next time, before you leave. Yeah. Just put it on
his forehead.
We spent a couple days down in Washington, D.C. for a little time that our kids had off. We were actually going to do something a little bit more exotic, and the State Department was still saying don't travel. And of course, COVID restrictions are easing. But one of the things that you'll notice, even just doing this short little travel, which is just 5 hours away by train, everything is expensive. For instance, food. And we've recently seen gasoline prices are going up. And so I think we should be mindful of that as we approach our own businesses, that sometimes we sell ourselves short. We mentioned on other shows where people who put in, custom televisions and sound systems. They have colossal markups. And it's reasonably simple compared to a lot of the stuff that we have to do on a technical level. So we should just join in the fun and start raising our rates. That's what I say.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I was actually thinking this was heading in a different direction. Clients are extra sensitive now to rates. Everything's going up, and this happened to me. I raised my rates like in 2008, in the middle of the global financial crisis, starting first with new clients, eventually announcing it to existing clients. And I felt in that case, it was worth sending out like a proactive announcement, like a newsletter. These are my new rates. Of course, the only people you hear back from are people that are upset about it. Nobody's writing you back saying like, got it, thanks, or like, congrats on the new rate, or I'm happy to be paying you more. It's like nobody's going to say that.
On the new rate.
Like they're going. So I hear from one guy who's like, businesses are shuttering left and right, and you go down to the corner gas store and there's a mile like around the block. The shelves are bare at the grocery store. I mean, he was painting this picture like this absurdist kind of attitude about like how bad things were. So he wasn't living on the street or anything like that, but he was painting this picture like in the midst of all of this, one man has the nerve to raise his rates kind of thing, and, I didn't take that great. He's like, I'm just kidding. After that, he just kind of wrote back. He was like, just messing around. I think that clients are extra sensitive to everyone jumping on the bandwagon now. Everything's priced more and higher and higher and higher. Once again, I've been working on my rate structure after talking with John Brown a few months ago, and then thinking this through and talking with you guys and stuff. My move now is to raise my on-site rate, which, by the way, I probably should have done a year ago or 2 years ago, because it would have been easier to do in the middle of COVID when we weren't going on site. Might have been harder in some ways, because then people might have been extra sensitive to it, like with all the trouble in the world, like you're also charging me more. It's one more thing they're upset about. But anyway, I decided to do it. I'm in the middle of that now. And of course, now we're also going through some significant inflation. That might be a difficult time to raise the rate. But to your point, Jerry, it might also be like, well, just another symptom of inflation. So maybe clients will just kind of take it in stride. My thing was, we do very little on-site work. So raising the on-site rate specifically shouldn't affect too many clients. And it really just simply is in line with the actual cost of providing support, especially over the last couple of years.
Well, I'm thinking for you, Joe, just the plane tickets alone from Colorado to do the on-site
right.
work in Connecticut, you're probably losing money. So I'm all for you raising your rates.
It's almost equivalent to paying you, Jerry, your subcontracting rate for the same work.
That's right. It's almost as high as that. Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, but in all seriousness, why should you be the good guy out there? And I'm not asking you to be a bad guy, but at the same time, the guy with the corner gas station, he's raising his rates. You take a family of four, as you could tell, I'm really sensitive about this. A family of four out for some lunch at a place which is like the equivalent of Chipotle. And by the time you add in a few drinks, you're into like $65. It's like, wait a minute, when did we start paying something like that? I mean, it's just everything's through the roof. So we're paying a little bit more for the stuff that we're getting due to supply chain problems. I see no problem. If you're, for instance, in my case, I use a lot of Unify equipment. And if I'm stockpiling a little bit of it and then I have to use it at a client site, I see no problem with adding a percentage on top for the fact that you have in stock a piece of equipment, which right now, if you go to the Unify website, is showing out of stock.
Yeah, everything's showing out of stock there. I mean, that's old news, but it's been going on for a while that, they really can't keep products in stock. They're great at announcing products. They're great at limited release products, early access, but like they're not great at selling products. I mean, they just can't seem to get them into the supply chain fast enough. And it's not just a Unify thing. Obviously, it's the whole supply chain with where the stuff is manufactured. And now there's a lockdown in different parts of China. And that's clearly going to affect Apple's already delayed kind of shipping and stuff with manufacturing their products. So yeah, the whole industry is still experiencing this. And I think that's a great example, Jerry, actually, just being able to stock what the little stuff you can get. The things that you tend to kind of standardize on, stock a few, enough to do one job or 1.5 jobs kind of thing, so that you can always have stuff in queue, because it serves two benefits. One is you get paid a little bit of margin for the trouble. Part of that goes toward just the cash flow, tying up the cash flow in your inventory. So obviously that's kind of the point of a margin. but you can hopefully make a little bit on top of it where it is actually worth, you're making some profit even after, cash question, but also because it cuts down the time between jobs. Like you can pitch a project, and if they actually approve of the project, then you can go ahead right away. You don't have to wait for stuff. I was dealing with one over the last couple of weeks where we spec'd a store had a fire and, there's some smoke damage, but no other real damage. They gutted the store and redid it to just get rid of the smoke smell and replaced a bunch of the network equipment and wanted to add some cameras and things. So we spec'd out all great UniFi stuff, and half of it was out of stock by the time the client, was ready to proceed after a week or two. And clients are used to okay, I'm just going to click buy right now. I'm ready now. I'm going to buy it now and I'll have it tomorrow. And that's just not the case anymore. Well, should we adjust this? Let's swap this component. Would this be the same? Well, if we swap a Dream Machine out for the standard Dream Machine or something, then it doesn't have PoE. So we might have to add a PoE switch. There's just lots of little things to consider, which cameras we're going with and things like that. The time we spend reworking the proposal and the delay before we actually get the work billed and invoiced, maybe it would have been much more beneficial to just pay a little bit upfront to stock the stuff and charge them a little more when you install it. So for this job, we were looking at the UniFi Protect because, like you said earlier, Jerry, it's built in. It's just great how extensible the UniFi platform has gotten over the last couple of years. And so we were looking at doing that. But of course, one of the concerns was, well, we didn't really need the storage space of their NVR or, the new NVR Pro for that matter. It does RAID 5, which is nice, but I'd really prefer a RAID 6 option if we needed more space and if we really wanted the redundancy and stuff like that. But besides RAID 5 or RAID 6, there's no offsite option as far as I can tell. There's no built-in option anyway, as of now.
Right.
And that may change. There's rumors that they're going to have an archive kind of thing where your stuff, your UniFi Protect camera streams or events or whatever would be accessible through a UniFi Cloud kind of thing, that they run, a server that they run. That seems likely that they'll do that. It seems like they're big fans of just charging monthly for things, if they can, because they don't do that typically with just the standard network stuff. So I think they probably want to add that kind of feature on. You can do it with clone the folder of the storage to your own Synology in an offsite location, but I definitely wouldn't want to do that for just a random mom and pop store kind of client.
Right. But is that a deal breaker for you?
Well, no. So that's the thing. So at first, I thought, well, in a perfect solution, I would have RAID 6 like a Synology has, built in typically, and also an offsite component. Maybe it would be replicating to an offsite Synology, for example. That's all built into Synology's surveillance station. I look at that as that's what I would want for me. But then I thought about it. I don't think the client cares at all. And that's ultimately what we determined. I said, let's check with the client and just let them know that, essentially, if we go with the Dream Machine Pro or Dream Machine SE, it has a bay for one hard drive. So not only is there not RAID 6 or RAID 5, there's just one drive, and there's no offsite. I suspect that this client really just wants to be able to observe the store, wants to just be on vacation somewhere or be home or whatever, and check in on things. Okay, how much foot traffic is there? Let's just make sure that things are tidy or whatever. I don't know, but just kind of wants the peace of mind of being able to look in on the store. And sure enough, that's exactly what she said she wanted. She didn't really care about redundancy. What I realized eventually was if somebody's coming in to rob your store, they're not going to find the Dream Machine Pro, rip it off the wall and take it just to avoid the evidence being used against them. And for that matter, they're probably going to have masks on. No one's, you know what I mean? You're not going to capture anything useful in all likelihood anyway.
But in Ozark, the TV series, they erased the surveillance tapes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. If somebody really wanted to bother with this stuff, if they're going to find the thing hanging on the wall, it's not any less likely that they're going to be able to try to remote in and wipe some footage or something. I don't know.
Well, they killed somebody too, so probably.
Exactly. Way to spoil it, Jerry.
This is interesting, Joe, that you bring this up because I was just thinking about this because I have a manufacturing client, and we're using a Synology and RAID 6 configuration for their video retention, and they've got a boatload of cameras now. I think we got 15 or 16 cameras. 30 days, 60 days retention, that's an enormous amount of data, even running at H.265, which gives you really great quality and really good compression. It's still a lot to push up to B2. So that's a real expensive add-on if, in fact, you had the capability to do the offsite just to push all that video up there. It can get very costly for doing offsite video, as you can imagine.
That's a great point, too. Well, one of the things I researched was just finding out what all these different options are. Realized that also, like, we want to send this proposal and we don't want to leave everything up in the air about let's figure out if there's a way to do this offsite thing. Do we spec the NVR because it has RAID 5 better than the single drive of a Dream Machine or whatever? So we were trying to figure all this out and then ultimately decided at least we know we can spec the cameras. And we can spec the Dream Machine Pro anyway, because, or SE, because that's what we want for the network controller and the gateway and stuff. Basically, the proposal was as is. And then if you want the additional RAID protection or any kind of offsite thing to Synology C2 or another Synology offsite, all that stuff could just be added on. And even with the unified cameras, you can actually configure the unified cameras as RTSP devices. So rather than being controlled and streaming to Unified Protect specifically, they can be a standard real-time streaming protocol that can just talk to a Synology, for example. So if we spec all this stuff and then she takes her time and decides eventually well, I'd like to have the offsite capability or whatever, then we can always just add the Synology and reconfigure the existing cameras, the existing infrastructure to just use the Synology for video surveillance. The Unified cameras are pretty great since you can get your feet wet with the built-in stuff from Unified, a cheap hard drive and pretty cheap cameras, and then you can always migrate if you want to. They're really cheap Wi-Fi only ones are under $100.
Those things, at least last time I checked, I was having trouble finding those in stock, the Wi-Fi ones.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I could say a few of those with a little bit of a markup.
I was just about to ask if Jerry had something in store for me. Yeah, we'll talk about what kind of markup that looks like, JZ.
Keep that page live. Keep the Synology store going and refreshing it, because I can tell you that they are filling that store 3 times a day, usually in the morning and midday and then in the evening. So you just keep doing a refresh and the stock is changing. Very much like Apple in their refurb store, it changes daily.
It's
crazy. There. You just got to be quick.
I bet they're air shipping a crate at a time of this stuff or something. I mean, it's just so constrained. They just can't get it fast enough. And I'm sure they're paying extra to just stock a few at a time like that.
So it's funny that we're talking about these unified cameras, because I actually was using the Protect app with my daughter today because she seems to have lost her wallet. We have a front porch camera, and we were going through the days of her coming back and forth in the house and seeing which bag she had with her. And I'm like, is it weird watching yourself leaving the house? She's like, yeah, it's super weird. But we were going through and she's like, hey, that's the bag I had on Tuesday. And then she comes back without the bag. She's like, oh my God, I left it somewhere. So it was actually a way of investigating something that was going on personally. But they've come in handy in a lot of different situations, whether it's deer in the front yard or something happening in the street. The one I have on the front porch is a G3 Bullet, and then I have another that's a G3 Flex, but they make a doorbell one too, right?
They have a new version of the doorbell, which is much, much larger. The one they have right now is very close to the Ring in size, and that's what I have. I have it on our side door, and I have it on the front with a camera. But the new one, exactly. But the new one has a downward-facing camera as well, so that helps with surveillance of packages that are put on your doorstep that maybe appear there and then disappear magically.
Right. I'm waiting for someone to do a glitter bomb doorbell cam, automatically identify a package thief, and then just spray glitter and fart spray.
There's some great videos out there too of just the doorbell cameras, and whether it's a delivery guy saying something sassy on the camera as he walks away or something, I just get a kick out of those. They crack me up. In the spirit of these cameras and everything like that, one of the big things we need are speeds, and we always complain, or at least I always complain in the area of Optimum and how terrible the speeds are. And I am amazed to announce that we now have gig fiber in our town. I have it run to the house right now. I'm just waiting to have them come back to do the run inside, but I'm going to get gig speeds.
Is that through Optimum or
through Optimum? Yeah.
Good for them. Is it symmetrical, gig up and down?
Yeah, symmetrical speeds.
Wow.
I'm blown away.
That's a big change. I mean, you're talking about the people who brought you 100 megabits down and 15 up. Or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That's great.
I also mention it just because, we all have clients in the area, even Jerry coming down and poaching clients nearby to me. So he might want to be aware of that.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. Thanks for the heads up.
I had such an annoying problem with Optimum, and it's still ongoing, where I set up a home workstation for a person who works for a client of mine. They want them to use their computer that's configured the way we do it. So it's like sending home a company-owned computer, basically, but it's like a part-time employee. working from her home, and had it all set up and tested. It requires VPN access to be able to get into the server. She needed screen sharing access to the server, to her user account on the server, terminal server kind of situation. So that was all tested and working, and she brought it home and tried to connect, and the VPN won't connect. This brings back memories, probably have double NAT or something like that. So we troubleshoot everything, couldn't figure out what's wrong with her home internet connection. It doesn't appear that she has double NAT. Doesn't seem like that's the issue as far as I can tell, as far as she says. But of course we tested it on her personal hotspot from her iPhone, which by the way is such a great troubleshooting tool for this kind of thing that's just a standard thing people have now. And so we tested on that, and of course it connected right away. I tested the same settings from a different Wi-Fi connection, connects fine. From my side, different device works fine. So it's just this Mac at her home internet connection. This Mac works fine on her personal hotspot to connect to the VPN. So I even went so far as to configure PPTP on the UniFi just as a test, like maybe there's ports that are being blocked that are used by L2TP. And then of course, because the last, I think 2 versions of Mac OS don't include the PPTP client, you can use like VPN tracker for that. So install trial VPN tracker. Didn't work with the PPTP connection. Tried VPN tracker now with the original L2TP connection in case it was something with the built-in client. Nothing works. So it was just really frustrating that this machine in her setup just didn't work. Collected the troubleshooting report for the VPN tracker support, and I'm hoping they can give me some info about like why it didn't work on her network. So even if I don't end up using VPN tracker, I can fix it if they can identify what the problem was. But all I can think is it may be an Optimum issue because she has the equipment from them, which in my experience is not great. It used to be fine. They would just sell you an Aorus modem, and you just like have a modem and then you plug in your own router and everything works great. Now you need their router and modem combo. And for a while, they were at least selling you 2 different components, like a router that's one device and a modem that's a separate device. You could replace the router. They don't really make that easy anymore. You have to, I guess, buy your own modem and spec that. But this is like a part-time employee of one of my clients. There's only so much troubleshooting the client can pay for, and there's only so much troubleshooting the employee is probably willing to do. I have to assume it's the Optimum. It's something about Optimum, about her particular equipment that's supplied by Optimum. So what's the equipment for the Gigabit fiber, to bring it back to your story, Sam?
Yeah, that's the one thing, because I do own my own modem. They said they're going to have to replace it with theirs. So I don't know the equipment brand or name yet, but I'm immediately going to look into if there are options for me to buy one on my own, because I'm sure they'll charge me monthly for that piece.
Yeah, not only that, but I feel like having control and having your own equipment is actually better. There was a while where we were advising clients, well, I don't know, like maybe you shouldn't bring your own modem because then when you call them, they can blame your equipment. There aren't that many problems like that anymore that legitimately, would be related to your equipment. So, I feel like it's much better to be able to choose a specific device that you can control. That's probably going to work better, certainly better than any kind of combo device that they, force upon you.
The other thing is one of the reasons why they couldn't complete the install the other day, I didn't tell you the whole story, but I assumed this was going to happen, so it was not a surprise. Because when you schedule with the person on the phone, they're not technical at all. So listen, my modem's on the other side of the house as to where the line comes in. I think that might be an issue. They're like, oh no, they can run something from here to here. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I'm like, we'll schedule it and I'll work it out with the guys. So of course, my modem is in my office. Well, what used to be my office, my kids took it over. And that is like, has a little closet area where all my equipment is. And it's clear the other side of the house of where the actual line comes in from the street. So I have a path to run under the soffit of my front porch. I just have to get that done. And I've mentioned this previously on the show. My neighbor's an electrician, so he'll help me run that line. I'll end up placing the modem now on the other side of the house, closer to where my garage is and closer to where the lines come in, because it's much easier to run Ethernet than the fiber line because they're glass lines. So like it's just not going to be as open to options of turning it in these corners and everything like that. So I'm running new line. Then when they're going to come back and they're going to place the modem in the other side of the house, and then I'll have my speeds. But at that point, I'll report back to you guys in terms of the equipment that they're going to use for that, and I'll see if I can have a replacement of my own.
Nice. Yeah, fiber is just as you described. I've had a couple of cases where fiber has not gone as smoothly as it should have gone, where a client, had like an electrician, who should have been able to, so like willing to work with fiber, comfortable with it, pulled the fiber cable and then like cut the end of it or cut the end of it and then pulled it through the conduit. So I don't really know, but like we had a ready to go fiber cable with ends already installed and stuff. And they should have been able to just pull the fiber through this conduit and plug and play kind of thing. We got there and it was not as spec'd. It was cut fiber, bare fiber line.
Oh boy.
If this is how it looks here and it's not to spec, there could be problems at any point along the way just as well. It doesn't exactly degrade gracefully. It's like all or nothing with fiber. That happened, and we had to call in a company who was able to re-terminate a connector on the end. We had a different client, also spec fiber, pulled through a conduit, and something about the way they pulled the fiber, it was just damaged at like multiple points along the way. We had somebody go out and really shine a light into it. They can determine kind of like where a break might be. So they found, sure enough, like there's some kind of a problem partway through. So it just has to be done over again. Can't be fixed. So fiber is tough like that. You're definitely right to run Ethernet as much as possible.
I got fiber. Every morning with a little oat milk.
Nice.
Some fiber, yeah.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century